What a great worship assembly. Uh, I've been in churches of 300 and 400 people that don't sing that good, who just kind of go through the efforts and the motions, and you all just make it come alive. I just appreciate the wholeheartedness of your assembly. Well, I got to thinking the other night. I had supper at the O'Banions, and I think it was Friday night. And as I was sitting there amidst all of the craziness, I got to thinking, where have I've been here before. Where have I seen this before? And I was driving back to the hotel Friday night, and it hit me. I know exactly where I've seen this before. Sound of I had supper with the Von Trapp family Von Trapp. You know, I mean, can't you see one of these girls twirling around in the gazebo? I'm 16, going on 17, and all of the music in the family, and everybody talking all of the time and at once, and it's like the sound of. And I don't know what we're going to do with Maria and Captain Von Trapp back there, but I love being with their family and just enjoy that. And they come to Tennessee once a year, usually in the summer, and I didn't get to see them last time they showed up. Julie did, but I didn't. And so I'm glad to reconnect with them and to reconnect with all of you. I know Julie stays in touch with the Liberties quite a bit and get to talk to Joe and Laura some, and I just enjoy and this Joe on the front row here calls me every once in a while. We chat. I just appreciate him so much, and I see that his wife never has been able to afford a pair of shoes, just like last year. So some things do not change. Let me ask you a question. Why do bad things happen to good people? I don't think that's a question that's just out of left field. I really think that's a question a lot of people ask. A question a lot of neighbors, friends ask when bad things happen. They're like, "We deserve this. Why do bad things happen to good people?" Let me start by reminding you of something I think you already know, and that is the Bible doesn't try to hide the fact that evil, bad, exists. Even in the 23rd Psalm in verse 4, he says, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no evil. He doesn't deny that evil is present. He says our faith and strength in God can overcome that. I think about all of the kings of the Old Testament of Israel. Of all of those Old Testament Israel kings, and the northern kingdom of Israel had 19. And when it came to good versus evil, you do know that the northern kingdom of Israel was 0 for 19. And it says over and over again, whatever king it was, he did evil in the sight. It doesn't hide that at all. Matthew 6, Jesus said, when you pray, one of the things you need to ask God is to deliver us from evil. Romans 12:17, never pay back evil for evil. And then down again in verse 21, don't be overcome in your life by evil. In Romans chapter 1 and verse 29 and 30, he talks about various egregious things in the eyes of God. And he says people are going to be filled with all unrighteousness and wickedness and greed. And there's the word evil. But he doesn't stop there. Envious, murder, strife, deceit, malice, gossip, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful. And then this phrase, inventors of evil. You ever thought about that? What does that mean? I'll tell you what that means. It means when you think all evil has been invented that could possibly ever be invented, Satan finds another way to market his product. And he's always marketing his product in any new way that he possibly can. He says, inventors of evil. The point is, evil is real. I think that comes home to us when we flip through the news and suddenly there is a report of some great evil and tragedy that occurs, and some random sense of violence, and we just stare at a screen and a news story in shock because of the horrific news that is before us. And names and places have come into our vocabulary that now mean something completely different. Columbine, some of you can remember. Do you know that happened in the last century? 1999 is when Columbine happened. Virginia Tech, Fort Hood, Aurora, Sandy Hook Elementary School, the Boston Marathon, Las Vegas, the little town of Uvalde, Texas, Nashville, where we live. We're innocent. The news stories flat innocent people murdered for no sensible reason. And we scratch our heads and we wonder, what? Why? It makes no sense. And yet it happens. And you can't wonder about it very long because there'll be another and another and another. I spoke in Nashville one Sunday. It was the Sunday following the shooting at the Covenant School in Nashville. And I spoke in Nashville that morning. Julie said, let's go to Covenant School. I just want to go there. And I said, okay, let's go. So we went, and it was a beautiful spring day, and the shooting had happened about 3 days before. And so we went to the school that afternoon, and there was a makeshift memorial with pictures of the teachers, students, all of those who were murdered senselessly. And there were teddy bears and flowers, and you can imagine the scene. But as we walked around and we watched all of that, there was a crowd of about 50 to 60 people, and we were everybody was just all walk. Nobody said a word. And as we stood there, just kind of taking in all of that scene in that very moving moment, there was a little lady standing beside me, and she spoke out loud, and she said, "Could somebody here lead a prayer?" And Julie pointed at me and said, "He will." So I said, "Sure." So we all gathered together in a big circle at Covenant School. We all gathered together, male and female, blacks and whites and Hispanics, older people, younger people. All of a sudden, it didn't matter. And we all reached out our hands and we all held hands. And we prayed, because that's what you do in times like that, is you reach out to the only one who can help you. There's no one else who could help anyone in that situation. And we prayed to God. That's what we do, because that's what you do. When things happen that make no sense to us, we turn to the only one that we can. Why do bad things happen to good people? You know, it's not that bad things happen to innocent people, because we understand that happens every day all across this country. Accidents occur. A car has a blowout going down the interstate and runs off the road and goes down an embankment and lands upside down in a river or something, and before anybody can get them out, they drown. I mean, horrible things like that happen, and we understand accidents happen all of the time. Anytime you take a trip, there'll be some kind of accident that you'll see. Problem is that these accidents seem to happen so randomly, and we're sometimes left asking the question of why. I mean, if there's suffering in the world, and there is, then we want to have a reason for it. We want to have some measure of predictability to it and preparation for it and all of that kind of thing. What I call the randomness of suffering, that is to us the most terrifying thing of all. The randomness of it. Soldiers in wartime understand it completely. Here's two soldiers, and they're walking on patrol, and one soldier is struck down by a sniper's bullet or steps on a landmine, and his buddy right next to him escapes unharmed. And many a soldier has come back stateside facing the arbitrariness of death on the battlefield, and he's asking the same question. Why? With the emptiness of helplessness. wrestling with this question. Why do bad things happen to good people? And the most scariest thing of all is that some people lose their faith because they cannot answer the question. So here's what I want to do in just the few minutes we have. I want to do two questions, two stories, two truths. Okay, if you can remember two and two and two, you got it. Two questions, two stories, and two truths to help us put some perspective on all of this. Two questions. The first question is why? That's the first question all of us ask. Anytime something happens, I don't understand, makes no sense to me. I want to know why. Have you ever asked why we ask the why question? I think the reason we ask the why question is because we expect order. We expect there to be an orderliness to life. We live in order. God ordered it. Nature reflects orderliness. It is observable every day. If you drop an object off of the table, it falls at a constant rate of speed every time. There's order in the universe. It's imposed by God. Count on it. In Genesis 8 and verse 22, you don't have to get very far. There's the order. In Genesis chapter 8 and verse 22, he says, while the earth remains, seed time and harvest, and cold and heat, and summer and winter, day and night shall not cease. I mean, this time of the year, nobody gets all worked up because the leaves are falling off all the trees. What? Or it's getting cold. We understand the change in the seasons and there's order in this world. And then we humans come along and we take order to a new level. We impose additional order. That's why we wear watches. That's why we have calendars and clocks. That's why this time of year drives me crazy, because I got to go change the 27 clocks in my house. And I always forget one, and about 3 weeks later, I see the one I forgot, kind of. We want everything to be organized and orderly and run on schedule, but order doesn't always work very well. There's a family that lives quite comfortably in a Midwestern town, and then suddenly a tornado drops out of the sky and destroys their home. And their next door neighbor's home is untouched. Ephrata. Where is the order in this? Or a middle-aged man, he eats right, he exercises, he's working to fight off heart disease because it runs in his family. And lo and behold, he gets cancer. Where's the order in it? Here's a woman who enjoys years of happiness and marriage and motherhood, and she goes out for her morning jog, and she is abducted and raped, and she wants to know, where's the order in this? Here's a husband who takes his family on a long-awaited trip to the Rocky Mountains. And he turns a corner and he's hit head on by a drunk driver. And in just a moment, he loses his wife, his daughter, and his mother. That's a true story. And he's like picking up the pieces, wanting to know, where's the order in this? Now, everyone in these scenarios, and in dozens more we could paint, asks the same question. They want to know why. Why me? Why them? Why there? Why then? Why? And that's not an easy question to answer. And sometimes there's not an answer. We'll never know it. There's a verse that helps me with all of this. And I'll give it, and I'm going to go ahead and give it to you. I want you to think about Hebrews 2 and verse 13. Because I think Hebrews 2 and verse 13, in a simple statement, reflects where we have to go with things when we don't understand. It simply says, I will put my trust in him. I will put my trust in God. You don't have a decision to make. When things happen and we don't understand, when bad things happen to good people, either we're going to trust or not. Now, I can read certain news stories, and I read a news story about a hiking group that was hiking one of the mountains out in the Pacific Northwest. And it was in February, and it was kind of a dangerous climb. And there were those who fell and died on that climb. And I'm looking at this news story, and I'm shaking my head, and yet in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, shouldn't they have taken more precaution? Maybe that wasn't the best time of the year to be climbing that huge mountain. Or I hear about a policeman killed in the line of duty, and that's very sorrowful, and there's suffering there. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, there are certain jobs that carry greater risks. But to be killed on a lonely highway in Idaho by a drunk driver, to be struck down by a deranged gunman who walks into a school, to have your home just suddenly destroyed by a storm, to have an illness diagnosis that just comes out of nowhere. There's no sensible pattern to this. We say there's no rhyme or reason. And so we ask the question, we always ask, why? But the second question we ask is, sometimes we ask the question, what if? What if? What if I had rearranged my schedule? What if I had taken another route? What if I had sent my child to a different school? What if? What if? Do we really want the power that accompanies the second question? What if? Do we really want to know all of the events in the future so that we can not only protect ourselves, we can protect the lives of those we love? Because if that's what we're wanting, then we're wanting to be God. And that option is not available to any of us. Isaiah 45 and verse 5, he says, I am the Lord, and there's no God besides me. That option is not available to you. So the best thing any of us can do is to brace ourselves for the tragedies of life and endure them with faith. That's where our faith has to kick in. Because if your faith doesn't count in hard times, your faith doesn't count at all. And that's why some people are able to withstand some storms better than others. They learn to live in hope. Hope that in spite of whatever the tragedies are, that my life is worth living, that my life is worth something, that my life is worth Jesus to God. And they turn and face the wind. And they turn and they face unanswered questions for one reason. I will put my trust in God. I have to. I have no other options. So the two questions. Then there's two stories that I think illustrate the two questions. Two stories. The first story is the Job story. And you can read in Job chapter 1, verses 9, 10, 11, 12. Job is a picture of prosperity and godliness and virtue. I mean, he's a very kind man, generous man, godly man. And yet, behind human eyes, there is this confrontation that occurs over the faithfulness of Jesus. To begin to understand this confrontation, but the Holy Spirit pulls back the curtain and lets us peek. And God grants Satan permission to make life difficult on his servant, because God believes that Job is the real deal. And Satan takes away his wealth, Satan takes away family, even takes away his health, and Job is left with nothing. And you and I can read the story, and we are privy to the bigger picture. I mean, I can turn over there and read the first couple chapters in Job, and I'm going, man, that is horrible. But let me skip over here to the 42nd chapter and figure out how this works out. We can do that. We can skip the rest of it and go to chapter 40, 42, and we can kind of see how things work out. But you have to understand, Job couldn't skip ahead to chapter 42. You ever read a novel? And about a third of the way in it, all of the characters are developed, the storyline is developed, and the author's got you hooked. It's one of those, I'll read one more chapter before I go to bed, and you end up reading 4 or 5. Okay, I'm going to ask this question. How many of you have ever read a novel and just got so engrossed in it and so nervous about the storyline that you cheated and you went and read the last 2 or 3 pages of the book? How many of you have done that? That's horrible. That is every writer's worst nightmare. Do not do that. but I've done it too. And we do that with the Bible. We do that with like the Job story. We like this is so we would just skip over to the end. Job couldn't skip over to the end. And if you know the story, Job and his friends, three friends come to comfort him. They don't comfort him. They pile on. They just add more suffering to us. And the reason that they did it is because they took it upon themselves to answer the why question. Job, you're suffering, obviously, because everybody knows only bad people suffer. And that made no sense to Job any more than it makes no sense to you. But long story short, Job's whole perspective on this thing changed when he finally came to grips with God's unfathomable greatness, and Job realized he had been asking the wrong question. Job had been so consumed with the why that he failed to focus on the who. The who could be with him and lift him up out of the pits of despair. The who could give him hope. The who that could give him a reason to live. And when you think of chapters 40 and 41 and 42, Job finally focuses on the who. But I tell you what Job learned. Job learned that behind what appears to us as random suffering is always the existence of God. God is always there. And he is in control when you and I aren't. And he is in control when sometimes it appears maybe he's not. He is. And Job learned that. And Job also learned that in suffering, God gave him tremendous power. Job got to decide how he was going to respond to that suffering. I think that's the most powerful thing God gives us, his choice. And Job's response, Job's choice, unknown to Job, had repercussions, not just on earth, but behind the scenes in a whole other realm Job would never see. Job and his life and Job's decisions he made in regard to suffering mattered to God greatly, and so do yours. Or the Joseph story, that's story number 2. Blessing, betrayal, blessing, betrayal, blessing, betrayal. I mean, Joseph just bounces back and forth between the two. And you know the story. Eventually, he becomes the chief administrator for the land of Egypt and oversees the storage of grain for 7 years, and then the distribution of that grain when the famine hits. And guess who comes to buy grain? And his brothers and his family. And Joseph reveals himself to his family and moves the aged father to Egypt, and there they live the rest of their life happily ever after the end. Well, yeah, that's the end of Genesis. But last I checked, there's 65 more books in this book to come. When you get to the end of Genesis, that's not the end. In reality, that's the beginning. And it's not the end because it's not even the story. There's a whole other story behind the first story that Joseph never lived to see. Although Joseph suffered, God would take that evil and turn it into good as a way to get his people down the land of Egypt, where they would grow into a nation of people. They would become slaves. Moses, a man by the name of Moses, would deliver them to freedom, and they would be given a law and a land, and through whom one day the Messiah would come, who would bless everybody, including you and me. So the Job and the Joseph stories are there to remind us that our lives fit into a holy plan of God beyond what you will ever be able to comprehend. Job and Joseph could not comprehend how God could bring any good out of this. How could God take my situation and be able to use it to bless somebody else? Oh, God can do in a way that you maybe have never thought of. Job and Joseph had no idea that their stories of suffering and their decisions of faith would impact generations to come. And neither do you. Genesis 50 and verse 20, Joseph said to his brothers, "You meant evil against me, but God took the evil and turned it into good." That's why Hebrews 2:13. I've just got to put my trust in. I've just got to trust him. Because God's grace and God's providence will triumph over everything that comes into our lives. Let me leave you with two truths, two questions, two stories, two truths. Truth number one, suffering is a part of the freedom of choice. Suffering is a part of the freedom of choice. God made us free moral agents. We preachers use that phrase a lot. What does it mean? It means simply God doesn't make you do stuff. God doesn't make you do them. The question is, do you like that freedom? God doesn't make you obey him. God doesn't make you disobey him. God doesn't make you treat other people right. God doesn't make you read your Bible. God doesn't make you pray. God doesn't make you make good decisions and choices. You're free to choose. But so is everybody else. And because some people make evil choices, do you want God to take away that right to all of us? When he made us and gave us the freedom to choose, that's a choice he gives to all humankind. And suffering sometimes is a part of that freedom of choice. Secondly, suffering is no respecter of persons. Our first question is, why me? Why me? Maybe the better question should be, why not me? What is so special about me? What is so special about my life that I expect God to deliver me from all pain and loss? If you think about it, that very thought approaches arrogance and says, in essence, God, if you really loved me, you would give me the perfect life. Is that what you mean? You could argue that people out here who suffer sometimes don't deserve the pain and the suffering and all. Nobody said they did. But I want to leave you with this thought. There are times in my life and your life that we endure the bad that we don't deserve. Sometimes we get the fallout from other people's choices and decisions. But the better thought is there are times in my life and yours we get the good we didn't deserve either. And we forget about that. What was it Job said to Mrs. Job in chapter 2 and verse 10? Shall we accept good from God and not adversity? You hear people all of the time saying, that's not fair. A world of fairness gives us what we want. But a world of grace gives us more than we ever deserve. And how would we ever know the strength of our faith if our faith was never put to the test? Where is the sense in tragedy? Why do bad things happen to good people? I don't have all the answers to that. In fact, when it comes to human suffering, I got way more questions than I have answers. But I've learned I don't have to have the answers. I just have to trust the one who does. And he may never tell me, just like Job. All through the book of Job, Job wanted to know why. Why? And God never answered that question. Never. His message to Job was just keep looking at me. Keep your faith in me. Just keep trusting in me. And that's his message to us. I will put my trust in him. So at the end of the day, it comes down to this. Do not be overcome by evil. You can overcome evil with good. And that's a choice. And that is a decision that all of us at different points in life will have to make.